Live, guys.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's just past the hour of 7 o'clock, and I will call this evening's meeting of the Appropriations Committee to order. Since this is our first televised program in several years, I think I should introduce our board. From down the end, we'll start with George Brinkle. Beside him is Tony Petit. Next up is Bob D'Amico. We have Janice Height, myself, Richard Niebuhr, and of course our town administrator, John Kadir. So the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for March 3rd, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Janice made a motion to approve the minutes of March 3rd, 2022. Tony Petit seconded it. All in favor? Unanimous that it is in favor, so the motion passes.
I have to abstain. I wasn't here.
The next item is our K through 8 School Committee and Algonquin Regional High School budget presentation. Before we get into this, I'll call on the chairman of the school committee to call her people to order.
Thank you so much. The time is 7:02 p.m. and I'm going to call to order the Northborough School Committee special meeting. Here tonight we have Kelly Gannett, Vice Chair, Keith LaBelle, Committee Member, and myself, Laura Millie-Jones, Chair. Thank you.
So I'll leave it up to you which one you'd like to handle first, the K through 8 or the high school.
So I will start with the high school. So again, thank you for having me this evening. Greg Martin, the superintendent, and it is nice to have a three-dimensional meeting. So it is nice to see everyone in person.
We're actually cardboard cutouts. We're not.
Exactly.
You know those things they sell at Revere Beach and place?
Yes. And I believe the last time I presented to you, I did not need readers, but now I do. So it's been some time. So this evening, I'm pleased to present the FY23 school committee voted budget to you folks. I thought I would share a brief presentation, and then in your packet, I know Mr. Kadir provided you with a wealth of information around the FY23 budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions along with Rebecca Pellegrino, who is the Director of Finance. So in terms of fiscal year 23 budget, I think it's important to note that we are a mission and vision oriented organization. So our mission is quite simple. It's educate, inspire, and challenge all students. And our vision really centers our work, and it's really about helping students leave Algonquin Regional High School or the next grade level or the next school, being collaborators, critical and creative thinkers, communicators, socially and civically engaged, growth-oriented, healthy, and balanced. So the budget process is, as you know, often begins early on in the year. So as soon as we close out one budget year, we're already planning for the upcoming budget cycle. So the work for us begins in September. And we begin by thinking about what we want to accomplish in terms of our strategic plan and our strategic initiatives. The principals and leadership team spend a lot of time thinking about the goals, thinking about what we've outlined in the strategic plan, and thinking about what our budget priorities. The school committee also identifies budget priorities, and this year the school committee identified 6 budget priorities for the FY23 budget. The first was to recruit and maintain and support high-quality staff to meet the needs of all learners with instructional classroom models, to expand professional development for all teachers, to maintain the district's capital assets, to maintain and support instructional technology, and lastly, to ensure all students are provided with equity of opportunity to the variety of programs. So in terms of the budget process, so principals and the leadership team early on identify their needs in terms of human resources, also capital assets, and also materials and supplies. And typically we ask principals to think about, if there were no fiscal constraints, what would they ask for in terms of their budgets? So usually those numbers are presented to the finance department and myself. And usually they're far exceed what we would expect the budget to come in. But I think it's an important exercise for people to think about what are those goals, what are those positions that we'd like to see in the budget if there were no fiscal constraints. From there, we really sharpen our pencils and go back to the drawing board and thinking about, work closely with the town and thinking about what the town context is in terms of the economic landscape, and we sharpen our pencils. So this year, we ended up with a budget increase of 3.46% over fiscal year '22. And the total budget was $26,692,953, which represented an $893,275 increase over fiscal year '22.
It's on page 11 of the presentation.
So in terms of the budget drivers or increases this year, of the increase, we did see an increase of $37,000 for contracted custodial services. So our custodial services contract expired, and we did go out for a new contract, and we did see an increase. We also saw an increase in technology infrastructure and maintenance and support, and we did have some deferred purchases as a result of the pandemic and being fiscally conservative, so we did increase that line item. We also saw a slight increase in collaborative tuitions of $26,503, and you'll see that the majority of the increase, the 3.46 increase, is salary increases in COLAs, which was $802,486. We're entering the third year of a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with our Teachers Association. In terms of budget offsets, we have two primary budget offsets. The first is circuit breaker, which is reimbursement from the state for out-of-district special education students. So we saw a little under $1.2 million in reimbursement. And then new this year, we did see some funding from the Student Opportunity Act, specifically around out-of-district special education transportation reimbursement, which is new. So we saw $33,909. And again, the budget offsets were a little over $1.2 million. So again, the total FY23 budget is $26,692,953, which is a 3.46% increase. And we do have some growth areas in the budget this year as well in terms of positions. We have seen an increase in students with significant needs, and we are adding a special, sorry.
Excuse me, I'm not following the numbers. You said the recommended budget was 26 million something? Or
26,692,000.
It's on page 14.
okay, I'm on page 12, and it says the
I think he's in the
recommended.
region.
Why?
You might be in the regional budget. There are two.
We're doing the Northborough.
So this is the other, this is the Northborough schools now?
So I think the only way I can tell is because it's blue, so I think you're in the Northborough Southborough regional budget booklet. So
Yeah, look on the front cover. Make sure you've got the K-8. They look almost, the covers are
Oh,
identical.
sorry, I thought we were starting with the regional.
Yeah, I thought it was the high school first, yeah. I was looking at the wrong page, too.
That explains the confused,
Okay, I was doing the same thing.
well, that's why, I kept saying what page we're on, because I was getting a sense that,
So that's how come we all have problems.
I can start over again.
No, but a lot of it was making sense in the beginning.
So I'm on page 14.
Yeah.
So page 14.
I thought the K through 8, pre-K through 8 was an excellent presentation.
Thank you. So the pre-K through 8 budget is $26,692,953, which represents a 3.46% over fiscal year '23, and hopefully that makes sense now. So, in terms of growth areas, so we have seen an increase of students who require specialized special education services. So we are adding a specialized program in Northborough, and it's a cost share with the Southborough District. So we are adding a .5 special education teacher to support students in that program. The students in that program also require educational support professionals. So we're adding 3 ESPs. Also, this budget includes a instructional technology specialist position at the elementary level. So that person will be responsible for working with teachers and principals on integrating technology into the curriculum. That is a position we've had in the past and we've eliminated in prior budget years, and we are hoping to restore that in this budget. And also a team chairperson. So the team chairperson is part of the special education team and really provides leadership to the special educators and supports the facilitation of meetings, paperwork, and works very closely with families to ensure that the team process is a smooth process. So we're adding a team chairperson to the budget. We already have a 1.0 in the budget on staff currently, so this will increase the team chair position to 2.0 at the elementary level. So we are adding a total of 5.5 positions in the FY23 budget. But if you look at the overall FTEs in Northborough, it is still a reduction over fiscal year 22 of FTEs. I believe it's approximately a reduction of 4 FTEs. And we have, as people have retired and through attrition, some of the positions we've not backfilled. We have seen a decline in enrollment, and as a result, we've been able to, if we lose a 3rd grade teacher, we might not fill that position because we're still within class size policy. So that's a kind of a broad brush stroke of the FY23 budget. I think that, I also would just like to highlight that the FY22 budget, this was the first year that we implemented full-day kindergarten, so that was a success. And this budget also includes the continuation of tuition-free K for our students. And I believe this budget provides a high level of service to our students and is fiscally responsible and educationally sound. And with that said, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions or go over any of the budget details.
You mentioned declining enrollment. It's in both school systems. What's the long term and the short term of that?
Yes, and from 2011 to 2021, we saw a 15% decline in enrollment. And from 2022 to 2031, we expect a 2.5% decline in enrollment. So we are plateauing. We are, over the next 10 years, we're seeing a decline of 59 students, where over the past 10 years, we saw a 14% decline, which was significant. So the good news is that there's some predictability and stability in enrollment that we can predict and project as we look in the outward years. In Southborough, we are also seeing a declining enrollment, and it's commensurate to Northborough's enrollment. And when we get to the high school budget, we did see a shift in enrollment at Algonquin Regional High School, which I'll speak to during that budget presentation, which did impact the overall assessments to the 2 communities and primarily favored Northborough this year.
So over the long run, it is going to be very gradual.
Very gradual, yes. I think we over the past 10 years, we've seen the greatest decline. And over the next 10 years, we'll see a 2.5% decrease, but it's over a 10-year period, so it is very gradual.
So the biggest problem may belong to the next superintendent.
Maybe. I also think that, the demographic, we're seeing demographic changes in both communities, that, we have, many families who are selling their homes, and young families are buying the houses, and, a lot of times the enrollment projections can't factor that in. So it's something that, work closely with John to monitor and try to project and think about as we project forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the committee have any questions? Guess we can move on from there.
Do you want to move on to the regional?
Sure.
Do you want to start?
Just, if I could just make a comment here, just to the casual observer, the budget that the superintendent's brought forward has already gone through an incredible amount of public scrutiny. I know if you're like me, you've probably seen this presentation at least, usually by the time it gets here, I've seen it about 4 times and talked to him about it about another 10 times. Going back to our financial trend monitoring and our forecasting meeting back in December, that's one of the reasons why we go through the exercise of looking backwards at our trends 10 years, forecasting forward 5 years, to get a clear consensus amongst all the policymaking boards and committees about what the town can afford in terms of revenues and resources. And so the budget that the superintendent's brought forward is certainly well in line with those forecasts. So, if he were coming here and with a 10% budget increase or a 6% budget increase, we'd be having much longer discussions. But the benefit of the process that we've used for the last probably 7 years is making sure that we have agreement on the assumptions and the process on the front end so that nobody sitting here tonight is surprised by a presentation. So what you've seen and been tonight and what's been presented to you is exactly what we anticipated. Again, I've said this many times, I really appreciate the partnership that I have with the superintendent and the administration, the school committee members, everybody working well together to bring forward budgets that can have the support of all the boards and committees that is instructionally sound and fiscally responsible, and not just in the current fiscal year, but also projecting out that everything that we're doing here is sustainable, and that's really important. Again, especially I can look at the school committee members sitting in the back row that are here tonight, wondering, how many hours this meeting might go, and they're probably pleasantly surprised by how quickly it goes and how few questions that we have. And that's because of the process that leads up to this, the communication that takes place during that process, and also the level and the quality of the information that's being provided. Years ago, we used to have to keep asking and requesting information on enrollment and on various information. It's all put together in these budgets, and it's done in a way that's consistent from year to year. You get the information ahead of time, so it just simplifies the process. But again, the budget that's being brought forward is well within the projected forecasts that is sustainable for our community, and I just feel like it's important when we go through these meetings that people that might be again a casual viewer. I know the superintendent and the school committee members, did you guys just whip this together? And, this is months and months worth of work, and it's important that people understand that. And because we're all on the same page, because we have comprehensive financial policies that we use to develop all of our budgets, what comes out the other side is something that hopefully everybody's on the same page with. And so I feel like I need to give that speech, because every year somebody says, nobody really looks at anything, and it looks like it's a quick approval. It's anything but that. It's if you do things well and everybody's on the same page, the end product is something that is hopefully very fully supported. And again, the K-8 school budget is, from my perspective, and I've worked closely with the superintendent on this, is something I'd be very comfortable supporting going forward to town meeting. Thanks.
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, I just had one quick question. You mentioned that you're increasing your FTE by 5.5, but you had a net negative because it's -4. So you lost 9 people?
Yeah,
like
so
that?
some of the attrition that we saw also was the additional staffing that we added as a result of COVID-19 and having to add additional positions. So, part of that is that Delta change that we saw as a result of the staffing we added during COVID.
Out of all the people that, is it mostly, was it part-timers or full-timers?
We had some ESPs, and then some retirements, and then some folks who were remote teachers. So they were full-time remote teachers who were on for 1 year.
Okay, so like contracting?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
And I'll just echo what John said. So John and I talk often, if daily, if not, a few times every week. And I've appreciated getting good information and timely information from John, and not just in terms of the budget process, but during the pandemic. I think when towns don't have a strong partnership with the school departments, it's very difficult to do the work, and especially during a pandemic. And I think, we met weekly during the pandemic with John's team to make sure that the schools were supported and in line with policies and protocols. And I think it served the town well, and I think it's just one example of many that, there's strong leadership at the town level and a great partnership with the school, so it's greatly appreciated. And it does make our lives a little bit easier when we go through, when there are difficult times.
So then we can focus and just talk about mask policies.
Yes. Yeah.
The budget's all set, but
I do have one more question. It's more of a personal, it seems like a lot of teachers are taking a lot of time off because of the COVID situation, stuff like that. So you have to backfill it with substitutes. Has that been a big hit for you?
So so one move that we made pre-pandemic, as we entered the pandemic, is we hired 3 full-time substitutes. So rather than calling daily subs,
So they're always on your list?
every school had 2 to 3 full-time subs available
Rotating
every day.
around.
So, and that ended up to be cost-effective, and effective in terms of we had the people we needed, because we had made a commitment to employees who knew that they had a job every day, so. But we also used ESSER 2 funds to kind of backfill some of the
Just-
additional costs.
But did it cost you a lot of money because of this whole incident, or was it a big hit from a financial?
This year, we're seeing it more so in our budget. Last year, it did not impact us as much as we thought it would have. And like Greg said, we were able to utilize some of the grant funding that was made available to us.
Okay, I was just assuming that it might have impacted.
Yeah. This year and last year, we also had increased costs for our nurses, our school nurses. And in this year's budget, we did see an increase as a result of having to contact trace. That was a very in-depth process.
There's another
They were
expense.
working
Yeah.
24/7,
Did you have testing and all that?
testing, and they've been outstanding.
So where did that money come from the budget?
A grant, ESSER 2 funds, grant funding, primarily.
and CARES Act funding. So the testing in the schools was largely funded through the CARES Act. So again, federal aid. And one of the reasons why, we talked about at your last meeting how we finished out the fiscal '21 in a very positive way was, as you know, we set aside a significant amount of money in available funds in case federal aid didn't materialize, but it did in fact materialize, and some would argue, at a higher level, I think, than we were anticipating.
Pretty quick, considering.
So we did not have to use our financial reserves, so those closed back out to free cash. And as the superintendent said, we had a task force that met on a weekly basis, and one of the questions was, do you have the resources you need to take care of the testing and the reporting and the contact tracing? And so we were able to do that. And I mean, as far as how we came out of the other side of the pandemic, I've said this publicly. Northborough was the regional leader in vaccination clinics, and we actually hold a contact tracing grant from the state for $160,000 to do our own contact tracing when the state decided they couldn't get it done and they wanted to get out of the business. So we've been able to it's been a lot of work, but we've been able to chart our own successful course through this COVID, and I hope it's over. But no, everybody worked really well together, and it went as, given the circumstances, it's great when you can focus on the problem, and the relationships were so strong heading into a very difficult situation, that the trust and the relationships were already there. It just made everything so much easier for us. We were just focused on making sure the kids were safe and dealing with the public and making sure everybody had what they needed. So it's a good outcome.
So I'll shift gears to the regional budget, and I'll actually start on page 7 of the budget booklet. So every year, we enter the budget season thinking about, what are those variables, what are those unknowns? So this year, we really had 4 unknowns as we began the budget process. And the first really was Chapter 70 funding, and specifically what the rate of funding would be for the Student Opportunity Act. So the Chapter 70 funding, we do have the governor's budget, and we're still waiting to see if that will be increased, as well as what level the Student Opportunity Act will be funded. So typically for us, the governor's budget is the floor amount we see for Chapter 70, so we could see, we're anticipating an increase as the budget moves through its process at the state level. Health insurance was also a variable as we entered into this budget season. Fallon exited the commercial insurance business. We are a single carrier. We have a great partnership with the town of Southborough. As a result, we had to enter the market for a new insurance carrier. And this is just another example of why a strong partnership is important. We were able to leverage our partnership with Northborough, but also this year we were able to have Southborough enter the partnership as well, increasing our pool. And as a result, we were able to, I think, bring forth a really competitive insurance package without a great impact to our overall budget. So I think that was great work. But that was an unknown as we
Yeah.
entered this budget.
In the middle of the pandemic, to go out to bid and have to communicate to all of your collective bargaining units that you have to do something with health insurance was quite a heavy lift, frankly. On a very positive note, on the outcome, the Insurance Advisory Committee, which is basically made up of all of the bargaining units through the school department, the K-8 school department, as well as the 5 units on the general government side, reviewed all the information. We've had a great working relationship with all of the employees. As you know, our 12-year average for budget increases in health insurance is 3.01%. The health insurance, by health insurance, I'm talking about for all the K-8 employees as well as the general government side. And was very happy to report that the IAC unanimously approved the recommendation to go to Harvard Pilgrim as our provider. And I'm anticipating, and you'll get this in a subsequent meeting, that the overall health insurance budget will be well below our 3% goal. So we wound up getting a very favorable renewal, partnering with the regional high school and Southborough to form a joint procurement association. And the real benefit to all this is the employee benefits were not touched at all. We didn't have to make plan design changes, so we brought in a very good budget, an excellent product, and didn't have to amend the plan design structure at all for the employees. So all around, it was a win for everybody involved. And by partnering with Southborough, we have historically worked with the region in a joint procurement association. And we've invited Southborough, but they always had a different plan design, so it didn't really mesh well, and they had different carriers. This year, they actually wound up coming over and being part of this bid. So we went from 400 subscribers to over 700. So our market leverage was significantly enhanced. And I think one of the big benefits I know the superintendent and the school administration is looking forward to is now between the Northborough K-8, the regional high school, and Southborough, they have the same carrier, same plan design, and so hiring staff and explaining and managing those benefits has been greatly simplified. So just on all fronts, this was a good move for everybody. So
hopefully we will not have to enter the health insurance market anytime soon.
I hope not.
So the other budget variable, which is typical every year, is out-of-district special education reimbursement. The state, that can vary 5 to 10%, and typically that is something we advocate for at the legislative level. And also not listed here, but it's in that line, is transportation reimbursement, making sure that transportation reimbursement is funded at the appropriate level. And lastly, new to this year's budget, which has not been a challenge in many years, is inflation. We're seeing the purchasing power of a dollar, be impacted by inflation, and it is having an impact on our ability to secure supplies and materials. So we are keeping a close eye on that and trying to make it as predictable as possible.
If I may just chime in through the chair. So in terms of the Chapter 70 funding, and the superintendent mentioned the Student Opportunity Act, when it comes to Northborough's full state aid, we get about $5.6 million. That's for fiscal '22. Of that, a little over $4 million of it, 73% of our state aid, comes in the form of Chapter 70 education aid. And the fact that the Student Opportunity Act is diverting almost all new revenues at the state level to districts in need, and again, from a policy standpoint, that makes sense. But from a Northborough perspective, at the $30 per student minimum aid, which is what we are, we're not seeing hardly anything in terms of an increase. So when you start reading in the newspaper, some of these neighboring districts seeing 8, 9, 10, 12% increases in their state aid, they generally are districts that have significant populations in need. So under the governor's budget, which was released on January 26, our state aid is forecast to go up 1.03%. So we hope, as it makes its way through the House and the Senate, that the ultimate budget, as they get a little bit better fiscal information, that we'll see a little bit more. But on the town side, a little bit more is $30,000, $40,000. Again, on a $5.6 million account, it's negligible. So we're just not going to see. I think it's a 6 or 7 year plan, the Student Opportunity Act, for implementation.
7 years.
So they're in year 2 of it, I believe. And so we're just, for the foreseeable future, we're just not going to see any additional state aid coming in for Chapter 70.
In terms of percentages, or roughly, there's federal, state, and then there's local. What percentage of school budget is local? What percentage is state? And what percentage is federal?
So it's 83%. So you're at the foundation budget maximum, so 83%, I believe, is funded through local.
All right.
The difference is.
The remaining 17% is state and federal?
Yes.
Okay.
But yet, schools remain the largest portion of our budget, and what percentage is that now?
Through roughly, they're about 70% of the budget. If you look at just the direct lines in terms of the budget pie, it's about 59%. But as we were just talking about, health insurance, so 2/3 of the health insurance budget is due to K-8 school employees, and then there's also, for the non-teaching positions, their pension is handled through the teacher's pension fund that's done by the state, and then the balance of folks are in our pension, which is carried on the town side. But it's about 70%, all said and done.
Which is steady. That's about what it has been.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's been steady because we have this, sort of this revenue sharing model that we came up with that goes back to the meeting we had in December, which is just trying to figure out roughly what budgets can go up across the board in a way that we forecast out and we can see that it's sustainable. And I think that's worked well for us because, frankly, I would rather have a predictable, reasonable rate of increase of, 3.5%. than to, get a significant budget increase one year and then not be assured of what's going to come the next year. The ability to plan for staffing and expenses, you want to have that smoothed out, and that's really one of the benefits of the trend monitoring, the forecasting, and the budget sharing model that we've put in place here in Northborough, is that it gives both the superintendent and myself some level of predictability for planning purposes. And it also, on a relative basis, it's kind of keeping the budgets going up together. So the beauty is we don't go to town meeting and, plead an emotional case to the taxpayers about who needs more money and why. It's all done professionally. It's done based on agreed upon financial policies and a process that's worked well for us.
I know John has always been more conservative in his estimates and budgets, which has always worked out well for us. So I want to ask, I think really worried about the inflation, because I'm watching on the news and the Economist this evening, they were saying that they expect this inflation to go for the next year to year and a half before there's any type of relief, especially in our gas and oil. Has that been fairly well looked at, that we feel confident with what you're predicting now?
Yeah, so that's another partnership that we have in terms of locking in fuel costs, and we do have a 3-year agreement.
Yeah, so we, in terms of electricity utility costs, we work with the school department to do an aggregation program. So we actually are out in the commodities market buying our electricity. We typically sign up for 3-year contracts. Our current contract actually expires this December, so we're actually starting to have some conversations about what that renewal will look like. On the heating side and the gas and the diesel, we're seeing some cost escalation there. But one of the reasons why the aggregation agreement works so well for us is, again, it gives us that element of predictability. And over the 3 years, the market will swing around a little bit, but it smooths out, and we found that we've done pretty well by those contracts over the years. Yeah.
Do you have any comments on?
I was just going to say that we've also done a number of projects at Algonquin, energy-saving projects, to try to reduce our costs for electricity. And Mike Gorman, who's the facility manager up there, is always looking for new ways where we can save money on our utilities, so.
And under the Green Communities Program, we've done a number of energy projects in the K-8 schools as well, exclusively using grant funding to do those, so.
And it's hard to believe, but this past summer, we completed a successful install of a solar array on Algonquin roof. So that was turned on, and we are seeing savings as a result. Unfortunately, those savings are being used to kind of backfill increased fuel costs in other areas. But again, it's still money that that we are saving, but it's also a curriculum tool for our students. We are metering, and we have a display in the lobby, and students are engaged in that work as well. So we're trying to look at projects in which we can become more green and more efficient, and that is just one example. We do have a solar study group that's looking at other alternatives to increase our energy savings, and hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months we'll have other projects in the pipeline. So on page 8, so similarly to the pre-K through 8 budget, the regional school committee sets its budget priorities early on in the budget process. And this year, the regional school committee set 8 budget priorities. The first was to prioritize social, emotional, and physical well-being of students and staff, and especially the requirements related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The second budget priority was maintaining high-quality staff, instructional programming, and instructional resources, including technology. The third priority was to achieve class size according to school committee policy, and the budget presented this evening maintains class sizes within the school committee's class size policy. The next priority is prepare all students for high levels of success in college and career readiness. The next budget.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Do you track at all what your graduates do? go to college, go to work, go in the service. I can remember very distinctly Jean Carlo from Assabet, who was a force to be reckoned with, saying that by September, all of his graduates either had sought further education, gone in the service, or gotten a job. That was it. What
Which
have
is
you-
very
what have
important.
the Algonquins done?
So we do track the path of our students after they leave Algonquin. At the college level, we track their end of their freshman year. That's a good predictor of whether or not they're going to complete their college career. And we have an exceptional freshman year completion rate where kids are not dropping out, and students move on for very successful completion of 4 years of college. In terms of career, we are not as good at tracking that pathway for students, but it is something that our guidance counselors and guidance team is working on to better track what's happening when they leave our organization. But overall, anecdotally, we hear from parents and students who return, and the common sentiment is that they were well prepared for college, career, or military, and they're very thankful when they return of their teachers and their educators of the hard work that they put in, because they've been very successful.
Thank you.
So the last two budget priorities is maintaining, creating and funding a short-term and long-term capital plan, and then lastly, funding the school committee approved initiatives that were recommended from the Coalition of Equity.
I've got another question.
Go ahead.
I got stuck waiting for an appointment today, so I went through this quite carefully. On page 46, I guess, capital budgeting. Maybe it isn't it? Anyway, where's the capital budget? You can't read the top 3 lines because they're green.
Yes, page 49, I think.
Yeah, well, those top 3,
Yeah.
what are they?
So the first is a redundant domestic hot water boiler. So right now, we have a single hot water boiler that it's end of life, and our proposal is to replace it with a redundant hot water boiler that is energy efficient. The second one is the outside accent border and walkway repair. There is settling along the walkway that has created a tripping hazard. It's something we're looking at to repair. The third is lighting control, software and hardware, and I believe that is located in the auditorium. Again, that is obsolete and needs to be replaced. And just lastly, energy management and hardware upgrades. So our software and the technology that allows us to control our HVAC systems, our heating and cooling, the system needs to be upgraded. So those are the 4 areas in green.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move quickly back to page 9. And I'm going to focus on the second to the last row. And again, this table really outlines kind of the budget process from the beginning, from the initial budget request all the way to where we are this evening. So the school committee voted budget reflects a 3% increase over FY22 and is $25,727,081, which is an increase of $750,378. On page 10 are the budget drivers. So we saw several budget drivers. The first is instructional textbooks, materials, and technology that were deferred. So that was one item that increased. Also, similarly to the town of Northborough, the Northborough-Southborough Regional District also has an OPEB liability and a requirement to fund OPEB. We have established an OPEB account and are trying to create a funding stream. Although a minimal amount is being funded this year, it is important that we add money to our OPEB account and continue to fund that moving forward, and that is $25,000. We have seen salary increases in COLAs, and again, we are entering the third year of a 3-year contract, so that increase is $286,941. We did see an increase in insurances, health, liability, and workers' comp. And we also saw an increase of special education out of district transportation. And then we did see an increase in special education collaborative tuitions of a little over $280,000. And although that's a significant amount of money, the $280,000, we are part of the Assabet Valley Collaborative, which offers special education services to its member districts at a far less expense than sending students to a private out-of-district placement. So we have been able to maximize the Assabet Valley Collaborative programs and have students enter its programs rather than sending them to private schools out of district. So although it's an increase, it actually is a positive, because if those are out of district private school placements, we'd be talking over $1 million in increases.
Janice had a question?
So how many special ed students do you have? Now, do you have any that are resident out of district, or?
We do. So
Yeah.
we do have, I don't have the numbers with me, but I can get the answers for
Pretty-
you. So
Yeah.
we do have a handful of students who are out of district. We track that. We have a spreadsheet for the number of students. But also, we have a number of programs that keep students within our Algonquin Regional High School programming. There are a number of programs at Algonquin Regional High School that support students with special needs, which prevents them from exiting our district and us having to pay private school placement. And it also allows them to maintain their peer relationships and be members of our community, rather than being bused to another system or another program.
Thank you.
So the budget drivers total a little over $750,000. And similar to the Northborough pre-K through 8 budget, we do have budget offsets. So we have circuit breaker reimbursement, which was a little under $820,000. And this year at the regional level, we did see employee retirements and leave of absences, which was a significant amount. So that was $464,912. And line item reduction. So we look at the line item budgets, and the financial department looks at 5-year trends. We try to average budgets on 5-year trends, so we did see some savings in line item budgets. So the total budget offset for fiscal year '23 was a little over $1.3 million. So again, the budget increase is an increase of 3% over fiscal year '22. It is, I think, educationally sound and fiscally responsible. And it also level services student experience. And oftentimes we use the word level service, and people have a reaction of, we're level servicing. But I will communicate that we do have a high level of service for our students with our budgets, both at the pre-K through 8 level and at the regional level. Students have access to an excellent program and have a wealth of opportunities. So a level services budget is not a negative. It maintains and supports the great programming that we have.
Through the chair.
Bob?
I just want to jump back a little bit on special education collaborative tuition. That's a huge increase, isn't it?
It is. So it's, we had a number of students who are out of district in private placements shift to Assabet Valley Collaborative Programming. So I think we had 6 students.
Yes, and I think we had, one of those was a new move-in.
And then they moved in.
Mhm.
It's nothing you can control, right? It's just
It's not, what we control is trying to, make sure that the students are placed in high-quality programming as close to our district as possible.
It's a massive expense, though.
Yeah, it is. It's very expensive. So. On page 13, I'll also point out that the regional school committee has had a number of conversations around the fees that we charge our students and our families. There are 3 primary fees. One is student activities, which is all students are charged $50. We have parking fees, so if students park on campus, they drive to school with their car and park. That's another fee, and then athletics. So this year, the regional school committee decided to take on student activity fees because every student is impacted. And the finance department developed a 2-year plan to eliminate student activity fees. So in this budget, the first year will be implemented. So we'll reduce student activity fees by $25 in fiscal year 23, and then in fiscal year 24, it will be eliminated completely. And then I believe it's the intention of the regional school committee to move on to the next fee. I think it's an issue of equity and access, and I think that free and appropriate public education has been challenged with many of the fees that we've had to institute over the past decade as a result of some very difficult budget times. And once you start charging a fee, it's almost impossible to remove a fee. So there is a commitment on the regional school committee to try to take a look and see what we can do in terms of eliminating fees in the future. So then on page 14, so the 3% increase is then, or the budget is apportioned by statutory requirement. So on page 14, you see statutory requirement for a distribution of Chapter 70 aid, regional transportation, and revenues. And you also will see the minimum local contribution, which is a number that is calculated at the state level and has to do with 6 factors. One of the driving factors is foundation enrollment. So how many students are enrolled in Northborough, in the Northborough community, and there's, again, an equation that creates the minimum local contribution for each of the communities. So when you subtract the minimum local contribution, you're left with the required contributions that is then apportioned by the regional agreement, which is on page 16, which is the next page, or 15, I'm sorry. And the only lever that we have to reduce the assessment to the communities is using excess and deficiency. The regional school committee does have an excess and deficiency policy, which basically states that it needs to keep 3.25% of E&D, and the remainder, any excess above 3.25%, can be considered to be applied to the community's assessments to reduce the tax impact to the taxpayer. So the regional school committee did make a decision to apply $600,000 of excess and deficiency to the fiscal year 23 budget to reduce assessments. What you see on page 15 is the impact if no excess and deficiency were to be applied. So 3% increase would be Northborough's assessment. But then on page 16, you'll see the impact of applying $600,000 and apportioning that based on enrollment. So that impacts the overall assessment to Northborough. So this year, the assessment is 0.17%, so a fraction of a percent.
Well, where did this funding for the E and D come from?
It's basically the high school equivalent of free cash. It's budget surplus.
But if
So-
you apply it this way, it's not, it's proportional, so Southborough actually gets more of a benefit from the 600,000 than Northborough.
So it's apportioned by enrollment, so if you look on, if you look at.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's just that, but this money came from the E and D, right? That is something, that money comes from, equally from both towns, right? Or no?
You have to think about it's funny, it's, excess and deficiency is basically budget surplus. It's the equivalent of their free cash at the end. So it comes from revenues over what they had estimated and expenditures that came in below what was appropriated. So,
I'm just questioning if it's equitable to Northborough in that situation, that's all.
So if you have $600,000, 61.8% of that goes to.
Oh, I know
Northborough.
where you got, I know how you
Okay.
calculated
Okay.
this. I'm just looking at it from a different angle.
Okay.
I thought it should be funds that should be apportioned to both towns. I don't know, maybe I'm.
you think it should be 50-50 basically instead of,
Am I being
it's done through
wrong? Am I-
yeah, I mean, it's applied through the regional agreement essentially, so,
Okay, so you have to go by the regional agreement
yes.
when you appropriate those type of funds, those excesses.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, Tony.
Two questions. One is, in here, we have the percentages of students from Northborough and Southborough. What is the total enrollment that that's based on? Or are those figures in here somewhere?
They are, so that enrollment is,
I found the NESDEC report, but I didn't see.
It's on page 65.
yeah, page 60,
1264.
65. Yeah.
1264, right? Oh, page, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So 12, 12,
Oh, there we go, yes.
found it.
Familiar chart, yes.
So I think that, I will share one of the anomalies this year, in terms of enrollment at Algonquin Regional High School, is that typically when we see eighth grade Northborough students matriculate to Algonquin, we usually see 100% of students matriculate, and oftentimes, because we have students move in, it's greater than 100%. In Southborough, it has ranged between 82 and 89%. So we see fewer students from Southborough attend Algonquin than Northborough. This past year, we saw 87% of eighth graders in Northborough matriculate to Algonquin. And I believe we saw approximately 90% of Southborough students, eighth grade students, matriculate to Algonquin. That's a bit of an anomaly that we're keeping a close eye on because it's not something we have experienced in the past. We do have some theories in terms of, COVID-related also. So we're trying to track where those students went. But it did impact the foundation enrollment of Northborough by 85 students. So 85 students. And basically, that then impacted the overall assessment to the town of Northborough, and it increased the overall assessment to the town of Southborough. So for the first time in a number of years, we saw Northborough be the beneficiary of enrollment shifts, where for many years it was Northborough.
Yeah, and this wasn't a surprise. We've been giddily waiting for this day, and this was forecast to flip back in 2023. So if you remember, 2 fiscal years ago, we were in the opposite position where we were looking at an 8-9% assessment increase, and it was significant, a significant impact on us. And we had projected out, we had several working groups, one special meeting with this committee just to go through enrollment and projections so that we had a handle on how long it would take to kind of weather that enrollment shift. And fiscal 2023 was forecast to be when it would flip back. And so very pleased to see, we're looking at essentially a flat high school assessment. And when it's all said and done, by the time the House and the Senate and the final budgets all come through, I mean, basically, we're looking at, we might be looking at a zero or a ever so slight negative at the end of the day. So it's good. So we sort of, paid some heavier prices a couple years back, and now it's shifting back. So it's good because we need the break. Right now, as you know, from our forecast meeting, because single-family home values are escalating at a significant rate right now, between 7 and 10%, we're seeing, tax bills going up significantly. We forecast, I think, $560 increase for fiscal -- The budgets are reasonable. The budgets are going up 3.5%. The high school assessment's going up, less than 1%. But the impact is still going to be felt by the taxpayer. And if you look at our neighboring communities, originally Westboro had forecast a $1,300 increase, which I think now is an $1,100 increase. And Shrewsbury was talking about an $1,100 increase in their tax bill as well for fiscal '23. So it's not just us, but we're just seeing, because of the market right now for single-family homes escalating much more rapidly than commercial industrial property, there's a shift. And so the town and the schools, we don't get any more money. It's just a shift in who pays based on the value of the asset that you have. And so there's a lot of pressure on the tax bill. And, by having this little break in the assessment this year for the high school, it will reduce that forecasted tax impact. I don't have the numbers exactly, but it's likely to be about a $40 or $50 decrease from what we were forecasting back in December. So it's a welcome break. And again, we did pay significantly higher a couple years back. And the budgets, I just want to state for the record, the budgets for the high school have been consistently reasonable in the 3.5% range. And the shift in our assessment is really just depends on how many of our students versus Southborough students go. And sometimes we may not be sending all that many more students, but if Southborough sends less, even though we're holding steady, we're going to see a shift in terms of who pays the larger percentage. So again, this actually worked out. We spent a lot of time, and the superintendent and his staff did a great job providing analysis and forecasts for us in the last 2 fiscal years. So it's nice to see that those forecasts have actually borne out, and we're getting a little bit of break this year. I don't feel bad for my friends in Southborough, since it's their turn to pay the heavier bill.
Yeah, and I think your point around our responsibility at the regional school district level is to bring in budget within the context and what the towns can afford. And a 3% budget increase is a modest increase. And at that point, the enrollments, the assessments, calculation will do what it does. And the only lever that we have is to maintain good policy around E&D and good fiscal practices, so that we do have a lever to try to minimize the impact of an assessment. Because if you look at the assessment prior to applying $600,000 of E&D, you're talking about a 13% increase to Southborough. So that's, I think, important to note.
What does that leave the regional district with in terms of E&D?
So we're forecasting out that we will still remain within that 3.25 to 3.75% range. So when we certified at the beginning of the year, we were at, I believe it was 1.2 million at the beginning of the year.
It's also important to note that there's very little that we can do with E&D other than reduce assessments.
That's too bad.
So I'd be happy to answer any detailed questions that you folks may have.
Just a couple of defining questions. What is PL 504 compliance? What is that?
504 compliance would be if a student is not on an IEP, like a special education student, but does require some sort of a modification or an accommodation. Like, let's say a student breaks their leg and requires special
Okay, so
transportation.
it's not an IEP, it's
Yes,
something different,
exactly.
okay.
It's part of IDEA, you know, and it's a component of IDEA, so special education in 504 sits within that larger law.
Okay, thanks. I just need to define, and I have one last question. It wasn't on your list of big hitters, but it looks like a big hitter to me. This tech infra maintenance support salaries line goes from 25,000 to 193,000. That's a big number. So I was wondering if you can explain what happened there.
Definitely. So we are actually aligning all of our codes to the DESI account codes. So you'll notice some of the other line items that relate to technology have actually significantly decreased, because what we're doing is we've moved some of our salaries from one line item to the correct DESI account code number. So we previously had them under, in a couple of areas of the budget, one up under the central office, which was district-wide administration, and then also instructional assistants, and now we've moved them into 4,400, which is where DESI wants us to pay those salaries from.
Okay, so that means the 27,000 for that one line?
Has been, yeah, that was a,
Then I see one that's a zero that goes to 49,000. So really, that's, I don't see that as a net wash, but okay.
if you look actually on pages 39 to 42, what we've tried to do is I've put asterisks on the accounts that have been impacted by this change. So at the top of page 40, you'll see account 1230. That has been significantly reduced. And then we've also created a couple of new accounts, 2120 and 2130. And those salaries were in different parts of the budget, but now, because we have to report out to DESI on our end-of-year report, this will streamline our process. Previously, we had to go back and back out those salaries and then put them in the correct line items.
Okay. Maybe I'll talk to you offline.
Sure.
after.
So I will add too that we were using contracted services for our accounting. And we actually were able to hire an accountant. So we have been the beneficiary of someone on staff who has helped us be more efficient with our accounting processes. The end of the year reports that we submit to the state, we've always had to do a crosswalk and a tremendous amount of work. What we're trying to do is align with the accounting requirements at the state level, so we don't have to do all these crazy crosswalks.
No, I appreciate that information. I just didn't see, maybe I'm just not seeing. I just see a big number increase, that's all.
Janice?
This is, I don't know where this falls in. There are, what about homeschool students? There are 5 of them in my immediate neighborhood. I know that they do not cost us money, but how does that work?
So if a family decides to homeschool their child, they basically apply through our district. We approve the homeschooling request, we review the curriculum, and then they're marked as a homeschool student, and we don't receive funding for that particular student. But we are required to receive reports, a mid-year report, an end-of-year report, and monitor progress for all homeschool students through the age of 16. So we have seen an increase of students who are homeschooled as a result of the pandemic. And, we're seeing the numbers decline a little bit, but they're still higher than what we typically normally see as a result of kind of the health landscape that's happening.
What is that number?
Usually around, I can get the exact number, but it usually around 20 students.
20? Okay.
And, usually at the high school level, it's usually between 5 and 10 the most.
And can they transfer, if they so desire, into the regular school system?
They can, so part of our record keeping is making sure we're monitoring grade level and making sure they're on track, and they can return if they so choose.
Thank you.
One other question about the local versus state, et cetera. I think, I'm sure this is correct, that kind of at the state and federal level, it's more what you get, it depends on the number of students you have. So as the students decrease, you get less. So that would put more pressure on local.
Correct, so chapter 70 is by per pupil.
Per pupil.
Transportation
Although-
reimbursement. The only other federal dollars that aren't necessarily impacted by declining enrollment, and that is some of our federal grants, our special education, and our Title I grants, which is based on social economic status.
Right.
So,
The reason I'm asking is, again, the budget's going up about 3%.
yeah.
But if you look at it as the cost per student, it's going up around 9%.
Mhm.
And, I'm wondering how long we can sustain that.
It's a great question, yeah.
No answer.
I mean, I think, I'd want to do a historical look back to see, what the increase is, because I would argue that it's been that way for a number of years. And we've been able to, through good policy and fiscal management, sustain a high-quality program and sustain those levels. I think the Student Opportunity Act is looking at, although we're not seeing increased funding like a Worcester, we are seeing increased funding for certain category of students. So for example, we're getting more per pupil for English learners, more per pupil for students who are identified as, socially economic disadvantaged. But it's something we monitor closely. I can do an analysis and get back to you. I have an immediate answer for you.
Well, seeing no more questions, I think I'd just like to say how much I appreciate and thank you and your school committee. Since John came on board and the various superintendents we've had since then, it's really been a pleasure working with the schools. I know that we used to come in and basically they'd drop a phone book in front of us. It was nothing but line items, how many erasers we're buying, how many pencils we're buying, and they get fighting over that. And my very first night after being appointed to the Appropriations Committee, my first meeting, the Appropriations Committee got up and walked out on the school committee giving their report. It was so contentious.
Well, I'm glad you did not walk out.
We refer to those as the dark ages.
It's been so much nicer since everyone has come together like this.
Good information and good process. That's what we follow.
First night I was on, it was a school committee one, and I'm always looking for some answer. Well, there was a discussion about plowing the road at Algonquin, and they were going, the town had decided they were going to charge a fee for it, so I ignorantly asked how it had been paid for previously, and the superintendent left right out the door.
But before we go any further, I'll give the school committee a chance to adjourn their meeting, and of course, they're welcome to stay for the rest of the night if they'd like.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to say on behalf of the Northborough School Committee, thank you for having us here tonight. We're proud of the work that the central office has done to prepare this presentation tonight on behalf of the K-8 School Committee. So thank you to Superintendent Martineau, thank you to our Director of Finance, Becky Pellegrino, And thank you again for our partnership. It was unanimously approved by the school committee. So at this time, it is 8:15. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.
The next item on our schedule is to review our meeting schedule.
So your next meeting is next Thursday, and we'll have DPW coming in, reviewing his project update and budget, and we'll also be reviewing the draft town meeting warrant. Draft town meeting warrant, actually, the warrant closes on Monday. So as of Monday, we'll have something to share with you, and then a warrant will be posted. The final warrant will be posted and voted at the Selectmen's meeting on March 28th.
I think our actual meeting schedule is taken care of on page 9 of our minutes.
Yes, there's a, yep.
If we hold on to those, that lists everything for the, through June.
Yep, so we'll be on March 17th, as I just said, DPW, and we'll review the draft meeting warrant. On March 24th, Aspet Valley will be coming in, as well as the police and fire budget review. On March 31st, we have the senior center, library, and then any other departments. If you would like to see any other departments, if you would let me know, so I can coordinate that. And then on March 28th is the mandatory joint meeting between Appropriations and the Board of Selectmen for the required charter budget hearing on the fiscal '23 budget. And again, I typically do a full budget presentation at that meeting, showing all of the impacts from K-8 schools, the high school, Assabet, as well as the general government. And then on April 7th, we'll have a round out of solid waste enterprise funds. Finance Department is going to come in and talk about debt and the final health insurance budget. We also are trying to get community preservation in. I haven't been able to confirm him yet, but he'll come in that night as well if possible. And then as of right now, we are looking at town meeting on the fourth Monday in April, which is April 25th. Which start at 6 p.m. at the Algonquin Regional High School. On Monday's Selectmen's meeting, the moderator is coming in, and they will be having a discussion about the time, the date, and the location of town meeting. So given the fact that, things have certainly improved with regard to the pandemic, they want to have a discussion about whether or not we would continue with an outside town meeting potentially, or go back to the traditional meeting inside at the high school, beginning on Monday and Tuesday, the 25th and 26th. So,
John, I know the planner is new, but usually we get a report from the planner of projects completed, projects going.
Yep.
New projects. Can we expect something like that?
yeah, we can work on putting something together. As you said, we have a brand new
It'd be
planner.
nice to
So
meet. Is it him or her?
her, Lori Connors. So
Okay.
Lori came to us from Millbury. She's excellent, lots of experience, and I'm very pleased to have Lori joining our team because she has a lot of experience with downtown revitalization and grant writing. So a couple of the big projects that we have coming up on deck right now is the downtown master plan, and so she's very excited to get going on that. So it's a perfect match for us.
Does she have a planning degree?
Yes.
Good. From where?
I don't recall off the top of my head, sorry.
Sorry.
But I'll send you the memo welcoming her, so you can
Thank
see
you.
it has her credentials and her experience.
Well, that
You back
also-
for more?
COVID still happening.
That also covers item 4 on our agenda, our next meeting date, which will be March 17th. And now we go to our final item, any other business to come before the committee? Yes, Tony?
I just wanted to ask if we're going to elect a chair sometime.
Yes, we'll put that on the agenda for your next meeting.
Next
Thank
meeting.
you.
Yep, I'll make a note of that. I did want to, just through the chair, if I may, mention, it's funny, I send you stuff like, I'm pleased to report, and then like a week later, I have to say, I'm sorry to report. So at your last meeting, I said I was pleased to report that the governor filed a $2.4 billion supplemental bill for the fiscal '22 budget that included another $100 million in Chapter 90 funding for roadways. Very exciting. This is our top priority, as you know. It's to deal with our ability to fix all of our infrastructure, our culverts, our bridges, our roads, our sidewalks. And so we're very excited. It went to the House, and the House passed the bill, but struck out the $100 million supplemental for Chapter 90. So I did reach out to them today and said, we're very disappointed. You're coming in to meet with us on the 28th. We're going to want to talk about this and why. And they seem to indicate that potentially we might be looking at some additional Chapter 90 for fiscal '23 coming up. So why they just chose to eliminate it from the 22 supplemental, I don't know. But if it means that instead of getting a one-time increase in the current fiscal year, and they are actually contemplating, I hope, a permanent increase to $300 million statewide, that would be a tremendous improvement for us. So currently, there's $200 million statewide, and that translates to about $525,000 on an annual basis that the town of Northborough receives. So if they move that $200 million to $300 million statewide on a permanent basis, or even a temporary basis, we're likely to pick up another, $300,000 or so. So that would really help us. As you know, we need to invest $1.1 million every year in our roadways to maintain the current roadway rating. If we dip below that, over time, we're going to be on a downward trend. If we can get a little bit more than that on the long haul, we'll be on a slight upward trend. And so it's really critical for us, another $300,000 invested in our roadways would go a long way to moving our pavement condition index up by a point or so. Right now, our overall pavement condition index is about a 73. Just like when you're in school, 0 to 100, 100's perfect, we're about a C. Some roads are good, some are excellent, and several are poor. So, but we have been able to, since we've been investing $1.1 million since fiscal 2016, we have stemmed the bleeding. In other words, we are on a downward trajectory, but now we've stabilized it and we've improved slightly. If this Chapter 90 money were to get approved, we would be just on a slightly more upward tick. What I will send out, I'm editing right now the legislative priorities letter that we will send to our delegation before we meet with them on the 28th. All of this is explained, the graph is included, the historic information is there. As soon as that's completed, I will send it to the committee so you can see that. And if you'd like to attend or the meeting on the 28th to see their explanation for why they cut the Chapter 90. Again, that will be at the meeting on March 28th. It'll be the first item up on the agenda. So I was very excited that the money came, and then as of right now, it doesn't look like it's going to come through, at least on the fiscal 22 supplemental. We're hopeful that 2023 budget, they're going to do something there, and really need it to be a permanent increase, not just a one-time. Through the chair, Tony?
Yes, Tony.
Just remind me, it's the regular appropriation is 1.1 million for the roads. And does that include?
Yeah, so the way it works, so our,
80 funds?
yep, and again, this will be all explained in the letter, but just briefly here tonight. So our target, based on our pavement management plan and the assessment that we did on every single road in town, shows that we need $1.1 million, again, to stabilize and maybe slightly improve. That $1.1 million is comprised of approximately $500,000 in our typical Chapter 90 appropriation annually. There's $300,000 in the DPW operating budget. And then in order to make it all work, every year, we have an article at town meeting to use $300,000 in free cash for roadway maintenance. And that's how we've gotten to that number. Now, originally, when the governor, they had a supplemental where they moved it up to 300 million statewide. So we were at that $1.1 million in fiscal 2016. And then the next year, they went back to 200 million. And so that's when we started, roughly fiscal 16 or 17, we started supplementing the budget with the free cash appropriation. And with the goal of, hey, we wanted to kind of keep at that level, waiting for the Chapter 90 to get increased, and we thought it was, imminent. We've been asking for it for years, and they finally did it once, and then you're like, they're there. It's like the tipping point. It's happened now. They're gonna just do it. And then they went right back to the 200 million. And so we've been consistently using 300,000 every year in free cash, budget surplus, to get us up to that number. So if the Chapter 90 funding would come through at that 300 million level, then the base budget would be at that 1.1 million. But the thing to keep in mind here, not to complicate the analysis, but 1.1 million, 5-6 years ago is not the same as 1 million today, particularly given the fact that you're seeing right now oil prices, doubling. So we need even more than we had before. In the letter that I will share with you once it's complete, there's analysis that Chapter 90 funding at the state level has been stuck at that $200 million level since 2012. If you look at inflation since 2012, it means that the buying power of that 200 million or that 500,000 that we've received is 42% less than it was back in 2012, and that's the simple time value of money. 42% less. So, we've done a good job here of really kind of trying to get whatever we can to into those budgets to maintain our roadways, but it needs a permanent increase.
But so you're anticipating if it does go to 300 million, then that's an additional 300,000 for Northborough?
Yes.
And your proposal would be to add that to the 1.1 million?
Well, that remains to be seen. In an ideal world, we really need to be above that 1.1 million because, again, it's not the same level of investment that it was 5 or 6 years ago. We're actually in a position right now because we had significant free cash at the close of fiscal 21. In the capital budget that is been presented to the Financial Planning Committee, and actually I'm going to be presenting to the Board of Selectmen on Monday, we're proposing for the upcoming year to increase that 300,000 in free cash to more like 460,000 or 454,000 exactly. So we're trying to goose that number up. The other piece, I did confirm with our delegation, at least our House representatives, that they still did pass through under the governor's supplemental budget. He was adding 100 million to Chapter 90 and then another 100 million for roadway pothole repair, which is basically Chapter 90. That has gone through. So we potentially could be looking at, if both passed, another $500,000 in Chapter 90 funding. So, but there's all kinds of, infrastructure funds that are out there. We're waiting to see. Unfortunately, the House also failed to pass the MVP, the Municipal Vulnerabilities Program, which is funding for climate resilience and so forth, and environmental type projects. And unfortunately, the governor added 150 million to his supplemental bill, and the House did not pass that either. So I'm going to be very interested when they come in the 28th to hear what their plans are. So basically, the governor's saying, hey, look, we got extra money as we close out the fiscal year. Basically, they're free cash. He wanted to add money into these programs during the current fiscal year, and the legislature's saying no, no, no to some of this. And I think, and I hope that their plan is that they want to put it into the upcoming fiscal 23 budget. So, but it remains to be seen. It's always a bit of a mystery how the sausage gets made at the state level because unlike us, where every meeting that we have has to be done in public with minutes and be recorded. They do all their business behind closed doors. They only come out into the public to take the votes on what they've already discussed and the deals they've made behind the scenes. So it's a little frustrating. It's hard to know how things are being decided because you don't have access, so.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Janice made the motion. Do I have a second? Bob? Janice made a motion to adjourn the meeting. Bob Brinkle seconded. All in favor?
George Brinkle.
George, I'm sorry. The motion passes unanimously.
I wanted to stay here.
Meeting is adjourned at 8:31.